I didn't realize how quiet a room could get until a stranger in a suit slid a document across a table and called it the final settlement. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic music, just the sound of paper moving and someone's pen clicking like a tiny gavel. Clara sat across from me with her back straight and her chin slightly raised, the way she used to sit during dinner parties when she wanted people to notice her. Marcus Thorne sat beside her, too close, his hand resting on the back of her chair like he'd already paid for it. And Arthur Vance, Clara's lawyer, kept smiling at me like he'd practiced that exact smile in the mirror. "Mr. Hayes," Arthur said, tapping the page with a manicured finger. "This is a clean agreement. No dragging things out. No unnecessary arguments. We all want closure." I looked at the paper. It wasn't closure. It was a list of everything that used to be my life, sorted and priced like items at an estate sale. The house was Clara's. The furniture was Clara's. The art was Clara's. The car was Clara's. Even the small things, the ones you don't think about until they're gone. My drafting table in the corner of the study, the set of plates my mom gave us when we got married, were written down as if they'd always belonged to someone else. Arthur leaned back, pleased with himself. "You'll keep your personal effects, obviously," he said, as if that was generous. "And one additional asset." He flipped a page, almost bored, and said the words that made Marcus smirk. "Parcel 7B4, approximately 50 acres, undeveloped." Clara didn't even look up when he said it. She already knew. She'd already decided it didn't matter. "That's your grandfather's land, right?" she asked, like she was trying to remember where she'd left an umbrella. "Yes," I said. "We're fine with you keeping it," Arthur said quickly. "Frankly, it's a tax burden. There's no structure, no utilities, and it's not zoned for anything useful. If you want to keep sentimental dirt, be my guest." Marcus gave a little laugh, low and private, like the joke was for him alone. Clara finally met my eyes. "It suits you," she said. "You always love projects that go nowhere. There are moments when your body wants to react before your mind does. Your throat tightens, your fingers go cold, your chest gets that strange pressure like you swallowed something sharp." I felt all of it and still kept my hands flat on the table. People think calm means you don't feel anything. Calm is often just a choice not to give your enemies free entertainment. "If we're done with the theatrics," Arthur said, "we can sign." Clara reached for the pen first. Her signature was fast and confident, like she was signing a check for a charity gala. Marcus watched her like he was watching stock prices. When the paper slid toward me, I didn't rush. I read the final paragraph again, even though I already knew it by heart. "Clara gets the house. I keep the land." That was the trade. A building for a field. A memory for a coordinate on a map. Clara's eyes narrowed. "What?" she said. "Are you really going to pretend you're negotiating?" "No," I said and signed. The pen moved smoothly. No dramatic pause. No final speech. Arthur gathered the papers as if he was packing away a problem that had been solved. Marcus stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "Good luck out there," he said, and the way he said it made it sound like I'd been exiled to a desert. Clara stood too, already turning away. "Try not to get lost in all that space," she said. Then they walked out together, and the door clicked shut behind them like a lock. I stayed seated for a second, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to notice the feeling of my life splitting in two. The old part, the one with shared keys and shared plans, had ended. The new part, the one I'd been preparing for without letting myself admit it, had begun. Outside the conference room, the hallway smelled faintly like lemon cleaner. A receptionist avoided my eyes the way people do when they're afraid your sadness might jump onto them. I walked to the elevator alone. When the doors closed, my reflection stared back at me in the mirrored panel. I looked normal. That was the strangest part. I looked like a man going back to work. When I got in my car, my phone buzzed. A text from my colleague at the firm. "You okay?" I stared at it, then typed, "I'm fine." It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole truth either. The whole truth was sitting in a leather portfolio in my bag, pressed flat against my laptop like it belonged there. I'd carried that portfolio to the meeting on purpose. I'd held it in front of me on the table on purpose, because it reminded me to keep my face neutral when Clara spoke, to keep my voice steady when Marcus tried to needle me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to win in the way Clara understood winning. I wanted out. I wanted my life back. And I wanted it without begging. The truth about Clara didn't hit me the day she confessed. It had been hitting me in small ways for months. The late dinners that weren't really dinners. The networking events that didn't need me there. The way she'd started dressing like she was always heading somewhere important, even when we were just going to the grocery store. The way she'd stopped asking about my projects and started asking why my projects weren't bigger. Bigger, she'd say, like it was a moral quality. And then there was the anniversary dinner. The last one. The one that should have been private. The one Clara turned into an audience. She'd set the table for 4, not 2. That was my first clue that she wasn't coming to talk. She was coming to perform. Marcus Thorne arrived with a bottle of wine, so expensive he held it like a trophy. He talked too loudly, laughed too hard, and sat too close to Clara, as if the chair between them offended him. Halfway through the meal, Clara put down her fork and said, "We need to stop pretending." Marcus didn't even look surprised. He looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for the moment the house became his without paperwork. "I'm leaving you," Clara said, and she said it the way you say, "I'm switching phone plans." No shaking voice. No apology. Just a decision. I remembered noticing Marcus's watch as she spoke. Not because I care about watches, but because Clara had once asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I'd shown her a photo of that exact model. Patek Philippe Calatrava. Half joking, half dreaming. I'd said, maybe someday, the way people say when they know it's unlikely but it still matters to them. Seeing it on Marcus's wrist wasn't just expensive. It was deliberate. It was him saying, "I have what you want, and I didn't have to work quietly for it." I said nothing at first. Not because I didn't have words, but because I wanted to hear how far they'd go when I didn't interrupt. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table like he owned the wood. "Look, Liam," he said, "Clara needs someone who plays the game. Someone who moves. Someone who understands scale." He said scale, like it was the only language worth speaking. Clara nodded along, eyes bright, as if she was watching someone finally explain the world correctly. "You're talented," she told me, "but you're comfortable. You don't want more." That one hit harder than the affair. Not because I wanted more in her definition, but because she'd reduced everything I'd built, every careful decision, every night I stayed late to refine a design, so a space would feel right for the people living in it. Into the word, comfortable, like comfort was a sin. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my glass. I said, "I want different." Marcus laughed. "That's adorable," he said. Clara's mouth tightened. "Don't do that," she snapped. "Don't make this into some noble thing. You just don't have ambition." They kept talking about their future like I was the waiter. Monaco, a lakeside mansion, the circles they'd run in, the kind of people they'd become. Clara watched my face while she spoke, searching for pain like it would prove she still mattered. I kept my face still, and I watched her get angrier because she couldn't read me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was devastated in a romantic way, though that was there, but because my mind kept circling one simple thought. Clara doesn't see what matters until it shines. That sounds harsh, but it's the cleanest way to describe the shift I'd watched happen in her over years. We'd started out as equals. She used to love that I could sit quietly and sketch for hours. She used to call it focus. Somewhere along the way, focus became small. Quiet became weak. And the more she chased loudness, the more she mistook noise for power. I could have fought the divorce like a war. I could have demanded half the house, dragged her through court, made her answer ugly questions in public. But I didn't. Not because I was kind. Not because I was naive. Because I'd seen the maps. A year earlier, I'd been doing consulting work, boring municipal stuff, the kind of job most architects complain about. I didn't complain. I like systems. I like how decisions get made. I like how a line on a planning document becomes a road, how a road becomes a neighborhood, how a neighborhood becomes a new life for thousands of people. That project had put me in front of zoning maps and feasibility studies. Pages and pages of dull bureaucracy. And in the middle of it, I saw a routing proposal for a state transportation plan. Interstate 9, a corridor expansion, proposed interchanges, survey lines. Most people would have scrolled past. I didn't, because I know what a single line can do when it's real. I recognized the shape on the map, a bend in a creek, the outline of a hill. I'd been on my grandfather's land as a kid. I remember how the wind sounded out there. I remembered the way the dirt turned red after rain. I pulled up the parcel records. Parcel 7B4. In my name. A piece of land my grandfather left me that I'd never build on because I never needed to. The routing line didn't just pass near it. It cut right through it. And not in a way that's annoying but manageable. In a way that makes the land essential. The kind of land you don't own quietly once the state decides it needs it. I didn't run to Clara with the news. Not because I wanted to trick her. Because I already knew what she'd do. She'd suddenly care. She'd suddenly have opinions. She'd suddenly see value. And the moment she saw value, it would stop being mine or mine. That's the ugly truth about certain kinds of relationships. Once someone starts seeing you as lesser, they start believing your wins belong to them. So I kept it to myself. I kept copies of the relevant documents. I kept notes. I did what I always do when I see a structure forming. I studied its stress points. Then the affair escalated. Clara stopped hiding it. She started bringing Marcus into our spaces like a conquest. And by the time she asked for divorce, I already understood the trade she would offer. Clara would want what she could show. The house. The art. The life that looks expensive from the sidewalk. She would happily throw away what didn't photograph well. The dirt. So I let her. That's the part people struggle with when they hear this story. They say, but didn't that hurt? Didn't you want to punish her? Of course it hurt. Of course I wanted to say a lot of things. But wanting and doing are different muscles. I didn't need to punish her. I only needed to stop saving her from herself. Moving day proved I'd made the right call. Clara didn't just leave. She arrived to supervise my exit, like she wanted to watch me shrink in real time. Marcus leaned in doorways, giving unsolicited advice to movers like he'd done this 100 times. Careful with that, he'd say, pointing at a sculpture I'd bought with my first real paycheck. That stays. Clara walked through the house listing what would be sold, what would be stored, what would be updated, as if she was renovating a past she wanted to erase. I loaded my books, my clothes, and the contents of my studio into a small truck. The smallness wasn't what bothered me. It was the way Clara watched it and seemed satisfied, like she needed to see my life reduced to cardboard to feel certain she'd made the right choice. Marcus tried to bait me. "Don't scratch the floors on your way out, pal," he said, grinning. I looked at him and said, "They're reclaimed hickory. They're meant to show wear." He didn't get it. He just smirked and checked his phone. Eleanor, Clara's mother, stood near the kitchen island, clutching her hands like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. She'd always liked me. She'd been the only person in Clara's family who treated my work like it mattered. But that day, she said nothing. Not when Marcus made comments. Not when Clara told the movers to be careful with the art, like my hands were suddenly untrustworthy. Silence is a choice. Il y a une chose, Clara. I noted it and moved on. In the attic was the cedar chest my grandfather left me. Heavy, old, ugly in Clara's eyes. "What is that?" Clara asked, wrinkling her nose. "Just leave it. Junk guys can take it." "No," I said, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. "It comes with me." Marcus laughed. "What's in there, Liam? Your secret treasure?" I didn't answer. I just helped the mover carry it down. Inside that chest was the leather portfolio, tucked beneath flannel shirts and old tools, like my grandfather had known that the most useful things are often hidden under what looks ordinary. Clara watched it go, unimpressed. "I hope you and your dirt are very happy together," she called as I shut the truck. "It's a perfect match. Unimpressive and going nowhere." She said it like a final verdict. I didn't respond. I got in the truck and drove away. People imagine I felt triumphant then. I didn't. I felt tired. And underneath the tiredness, I felt something steadier than anger. Certainty. Because I wasn't driving toward nothing. I was driving toward time. And time was the only thing Clara never respected. Weeks later, in my small apartment, my phone buzzed with a notification about local news. Rumors about the state discussing transportation funding. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. I'd already read the preliminary report months ago. Still, I found myself opening the cedar chest that night and taking out the portfolio. I ran my thumb over the worn leather. Not like a villain petting a plan. Like a man checking that the floor beneath him was real. The next morning, my mail slot clacked, and an envelope slid onto the floor. Plain white. Official seal. Department of Transportation. It was addressed to me. No resident. No current occupant. Me. My heart didn't race. That's the part that scares people when I tell it. They think winning feels like fireworks. For me, it felt like a lock clicking open. I sat at my table, opened the envelope, and read the first line. Pursuant to our preliminary assessment of the proposed Interstate 9 corridor, we have identified Parcel 7B, 4 registered in your name, as essential for the project's right-of-way. Essential. I read the word twice. Then I folded the letter carefully, placed it into the portfolio, and closed it. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just whispered to no one, okay, because now it wasn't a theory. It was a process, and processes have steps. I went to work, did my meetings, answered emails, pretended to be normal. But all day, in the back of my mind, one thought repeated with quiet clarity. Clara thinks the story ended in that conference room. She has no idea it just started. That night my phone rang. The number was blocked. I let it go to voicemail. A second later it rang again. Same number. I answered, because the third ring sounded less like a call and more like a warning. Liam. Clara's voice. Tighter than usual. Less polished. Yes, I said. There was a pause, like she was choosing the version of herself that would speak next. Where are you staying now? She asked. Not how are you? Not can we talk? Just logistics, like she was checking on property she'd sold. Why? I asked. She stopped. I could hear something in the background. A man's voice, Marcus probably. Then Clara exhaled sharply, like she was annoyed at herself for needing anything. Arthur says there might be an issue with one of the filings, she said. Just answer your phone tomorrow if he calls. Okay, I said. That's it, she snapped. You don't even care? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Clara needed my reaction like she needed oxygen. My calm offended her. I care about what matters, I said, and then I hung up before she could turn it into a fight. I stared at my phone for a long second after. That call wasn't about paperwork. It was about control. Clara felt it slipping, and she didn't know why. I opened the portfolio again, pulled out the DOT letter, and looked at the date. The first official move had been made. The next moves would come fast. Somewhere across town, Clara was likely pouring wine and telling Marcus she'd finally cut the deadweight loose. She was probably smiling at her own reflection, convinced she'd chosen the future. And she still believed, with all the confidence of someone who never checks beneath the surface, that the land she left me was worthless. I put the letter back, closed the portfolio, and for the first time since the divorce, I let myself feel one clean emotion, not anger, not grief, just anticipation. Because soon, very soon, Clara was going to learn the difference between dirt and foundation, and when she did, she wouldn't call a lesson. She would call a disaster. And the worst part for her would be this. I wasn't going to have to do anything to make it happen. The next few days moved in a strange double speed, slow in my body, fast in my calendar. I still had deadlines at the firm, still had clients who wanted revisions and contractors who needed answers, and that normal routine became my cover. People assume a divorce turns your life into a soap opera. For most of us, it turns your life into paperwork with occasional moments where you forget to breathe. Clara didn't just take the house. She took the rhythm of my old life, where my keys went, where my shoes lived, which drawer had the spare batteries, which shelf held the coffee filters. In my apartment, I had to decide everything again. I bought a cheap dish rack. I hung one towel. I replaced nothing I didn't need. It wasn't some noble minimalist decision. It was practical. Anything I bought now had to earn its place. One afternoon at work, my partner at the firm asked if I wanted to step away from a project for a bit. I told him no. He tried a kind version of pity anyway. Liam, you don't have to prove anything. I didn't correct him. I wasn't proving anything. I was staying in motion because motion kept me from turning around. I got a second text from my colleague. I heard Clara's throwing a fresh start thing this weekend. I stared at that line longer than I should have. A fresh start party in the house I designed. The place where I'd argued with electricians about outlet heights, where I'd picked the exact window proportions because Clara said she wanted morning light in the dining room. I didn't respond. Not because it didn't sting, but because I could already predict the whole night. Her friends laughing too loudly, Marcus holding court, Clara smiling in that practiced way that didn't reach her eyes. In my head, I could hear them talking about me, like I'd become a cautionary tale. I've been a punchline before. I could survive it again. What I couldn't survive was losing the ability to think clearly. So I set a rule for myself. No doom scrolling, no stalking social media, no replaying old conversations. If my mind insisted on replaying something, I'd give it something else to chew on: logistics. I opened the portfolio and made a list. Items I already had: deed to parcel 7B4, parcel map, preliminary routing proposal, soil report, tax history, a few older appraisal values, and now the Department of Transportation letter. Items I needed next: the official public plat maps for the corridor once released, the timeline for the public comment phase, and a credible attorney who specialized in eminent domain. I knew enough to know what I didn't know. The state's first offer would be designed to end the conversation quickly, not to be fair. And I was not going to walk into that conversation alone. That same week, Clara called again, this time from her normal number, as if pretending she hadn't called from a blocked one. I almost didn't answer. I did anyway, because I wanted the control of hearing her voice without reacting. "Liam," she said, and tried to sound casual. "Arthur needs you to sign one more thing. It's just a tax form." "Send it," I said. "I can't," she snapped. "He says you need to come in. He can email it," I replied. There was a pause, and I could hear Marcus in the background asking something like, "Is he being difficult?" Clara lowered her voice. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. The question wasn't about a tax form. It was about my refusal to play the role she assigned me. "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm just not coming to your lawyer's office for no reason." "Fine," she said sharply. "Then don't. But don't act like you're above all this, Liam. You lost. You can pretend you're okay, but you lost." I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I let her have the sentence. People like Clara need you to confirm their story. Denying it makes them itch. "If that's what you need to believe," I said, and I ended the call. A couple of hours later, Arthur emailed a document that did not require a visit. I signed electronically, sent it back, and then filed the email under a folder I named simply Record. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit. Architects live in documentation. Memories are messy. Paper isn't. The weekend came. I didn't look at social media. I didn't drive past the house. I cooked a simple meal, poured water into a glass, and tried to enjoy the quiet. It should have felt like peace. It felt like waiting in a doctor's office before you get test results. Around 9, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend who'd somehow ended up on Clara's guest list. It was a photo, not of Clara, not of Marcus, but of the living room. My living room, the one I designed with that long line of windows. In the photo, someone had hung a huge banner that said "New Chapter." The chairs were pushed back like they'd been dancing. On the coffee table sat a stack of glossy brochures. Marcus's latest development project, displayed like party favors. I deleted the photo. Then I sat there for a moment and realized something unpleasant and useful. It still mattered to me, but it no longer mattered in the same way. I wasn't mourning Clara. I was mourning the time I'd invested in someone who didn't value the same things. That's a different kind of grief, sharper and easier to cut away. The following Monday, I got another letter from the Department of Transportation. This one wasn't the official offer yet. It was a notice of intent to begin valuation, plus a list of contacts, plus a date range for scheduling a site visit. They were moving. That made my next move urgent. I reached out to the professor who'd first nudged me toward municipal consulting work years ago, the one who still sent me articles about planning and infrastructure. He replied in under an hour. "If it's eminent domain and you're the landowner, you need Evelyn DeWitt." I stared at that name. I knew it. Anyone who has sat through enough city meetings knows it. Evelyn DeWitt had a reputation that traveled without marketing. People said she didn't take many cases. People also said if she took yours, the other side got quiet. My professor added, "Don't go to her with emotions. Go to her with order." That part made me smile for the first time in weeks, because order was something I could deliver. I spent 2 nights preparing the portfolio like it was a presentation I'd give to a skeptical client who didn't want to be convinced. I put the deed first, then the parcel map, then the preliminary routing proposal, with the survey line highlighted. Then the soil report, not because I thought it would impress her, but because it showed I understood the land beyond a number. Then tax history to prove I wasn't delinquent. Then the DOT letters in chronological order. Then a one-page summary I wrote myself. Parcel location, acreage, corridor significance, and why interchange placement created value beyond agricultural appraisal. No adjectives, no drama, just facts and implications. When I called Evelyn DeWitt's office, her assistant asked what kind of case it was. I said, eminent domain. Parcel 7B4, Interstate 9. There was a pause long enough that I could tell she was searching a mental database. Hold, she said. Then she came back and gave me an appointment 2 days later. No negotiation. No, we'll see. A date and time. That alone told me something. At the same time, Clara's world was continuing its victory lap. I found out without looking for it, the way you find out things in a small city, even when you're trying not to. Someone at work mentioned seeing Marcus at a charity event, talking loudly about the next corridor expansion and getting in early. Another person mentioned Clara had joined a new social group that met for brunch and investment wine nights. People love to talk about the new couple in town. They love to talk even more about the old couple who broke. A junior associate at my firm, a kid with good intentions and no filter, asked me in the break room, "Is it true your ex-wife's new guy bought her a watch that costs more than my car?" I didn't correct him that she bought it. I just said, "Probably," and refilled my coffee. That question followed me back to my desk, not because I cared about the watch, but because I cared about what it represented. Clara's shift from partnership to display. The first time she'd asked me to attend one of Marcus's events, I'd said no, and she'd said, "You're embarrassing me." That's the sentence that should have ended our marriage right there. Not because it was cruel, but because it was revealing. She'd stopped wanting me. She'd started wanting a prop. The day before my meeting with Evelyn, I received a voicemail from Arthur Vance. His tone was different. Tighter. Less smooth. "Liam," he said, "call me back. It's important." I didn't call immediately. I waited until I had privacy, then called him. "What is it?" I asked. "Where's the land?" he blurted out. No greeting. No fake professionalism. Just panic trying to disguise itself as a question. "Parcel 7B4, I said. "You know, it's south of the city." "Where exactly?" he repeated, and now I heard the edge. "What?" I asked, though I knew. There was a long breath on the other end. "Clara is concerned," he said carefully. "About what?" "About the Interstate 9 project," he said. My silence stretched. He filled it. Official documents were released this morning. Plat maps. Public record. "And Liam, your parcel is in the path." "In the path," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes." He cleared his throat. "It appears the interchange." He stopped himself, as if saying the full truth out loud would make it more real. "It appears the interchange footprint overlaps your property." "Okay," I said. "Okay," he snapped. "Liam, do you understand what that means?" "It means the state wants to buy it," I said. "It means it's worth—" He cut himself off, and then he said it anyway, like he couldn't stop. "It means it's worth millions." "It might be," I replied. My calm made him angrier. "Did you know?" he demanded. There it was. The accusation wrapped in a question. "The corridor review has been public for a while," I said. "If it's in public record, anyone can know." "Don't play semantics," he snapped. "Clara believes you deliberately withheld information during the settlement." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Clara couldn't accept she'd made a mistake. A mistake implies she isn't in full control of her story. "Clara can't believe what she wants," I said. "The settlement is signed. She wants to meet," Arthur said quickly. "She wants to discuss." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "Not with me. If she has a legal concern, she can file it." Arthur's voice dropped into something like pleading. "Liam, be reasonable. This is a significant sum of money. And if it's marital property, it isn't," I said. "The land was in my name. The settlement granted it to me. If you think you can undo that, try." Another pause. I could almost hear him scanning his options, looking for a lever. "I'm calling as a courtesy," he said, forcing his voice back into its polished shape. "A courtesy is sending the document by email like you did last week," I replied. This is panic. I ended the call. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. Even when you're prepared, the moment the other side realizes the game has changed can feel like a door slamming in a different room of your life. I sat for a minute after and listened to my own breathing. Then I opened my laptop and looked up the official DOT release schedule to confirm the plat maps were truly out. They were, and that meant Clara had seen the red line on a map and felt the ground shift under her feet. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from fear, but from a knowledge that the next phase was about to become messy, and I hated mess. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. Don't make this harder." I didn't reply. A minute later, "Liam, please." Then another. "This is not over." That one sounded like Clara again, the version that believed the world rearranged itself around her wants. I put my phone face down and went back to the portfolio, checking the order of documents like a ritual. Not because I thought I'd forget anything, but because rituals calm the nervous system. The next morning, I walked into Evelyn DeWitt's building with the same mindset I used when presenting to a client who might be hostile. Don't perform, don't defend, don't beg, just show the plan. Her assistant led me into a conference room. Evelyn DeWitt entered without rushing. She didn't waste motion. She didn't offer coffee. She just sat, looked at me, and said, "You have 10 minutes to tell me why I should care." I placed the portfolio on the table and opened it. Parcel 7B4. I began. Interstate 9. Proposed interchange. I've held the deed free and clear since my grandfather's passing. The Department of Transportation has identified it as essential. I slid the deed first, then the routing proposal, then the DOT letter. I didn't mention Clara. I didn't mention betrayal. I didn't mention humiliation. Evelyn read without blinking, the way some people read contracts and some people read threats. She looked at the date on the preliminary routing proposal and then back at me. "You've had this for over a year," she said. "Yes," I replied. "And you didn't develop the land," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "Because you didn't need to," she said. Another statement. I nodded. She leaned back and finally showed a hint of interest. "Most landowners come in after the offer arrives," she said. "They're already behind. You're not behind." I kept my voice even. "I don't like being behind." Evelyn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "What's the state's angle?" she asked. "They'll appraise it as agricultural," I said. "They'll cite zoning restrictions. They'll try to move fast." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And what's the truth?" "The interchange makes it strategic," I said. "Ancillary development. Services. Commercial zoning changes after construction. The value isn't the dirt. It's the position." She stared at me for a long moment like she was deciding whether I was lucky or competent. "You're an architect," she said. "You understand land use better than most lawyers." "I understand systems," I said. She tapped the table once with her finger. "They'll open low," she said. "For a million, maybe. They'll call it generous. They'll expect you to take it because you're an individual and they're the state." She leaned forward. "Do you want fair or do you want maximum?" "I want what it's worth," I said. "Good answer," she replied. "Because fair is a word people use when they're trying to settle quickly." She slid the portfolio back toward me. "I'll take the case," she said. "But here are the rules. You don't speak to DOT without me. You don't sign anything without me. You don't speak to your ex-wife about this." The way she said ex-wife told me she already knew. "She's not relevant," I said. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "She will make herself relevant," she said. "People always do when money appears." I didn't argue because she was right. Evelyn wrote something on a legal pad. "My fee," she said, "is a percentage of what I get you above the state's initial offer." "Fine," I said. She nodded once, satisfied. "Then we're aligned," she said. "Go home. Let them make the first move. We'll be ready." I left her office with a new sensation in my body. Not excitement, not victory, structure. When you've been living inside chaos, structure feels like oxygen. On the street outside, my phone rang. Clara. I watched it vibrate for a second, then answered because at this point avoidance wouldn't stop her. "Liam," she said, and her voice wasn't queen-like anymore. It wasn't soft either. It was the voice of someone trying to stay above water. "I know," she said quickly. like she couldn't bear to wait for my response. I know about the land. I didn't speak. Silence makes people reveal themselves faster. You knew, she said. You knew during the settlement. I kept my voice calm. Yes, I said. The single word hit like a dropped weight. She inhaled sharply. How could you do that to me? She demanded. And there it was, the belief that my knowledge belonged to her by default. I didn't do anything to you, I said. I signed what you put in front of me. This is fraud, she snapped. This is you hiding assets. It's public record, I replied. If Arthur didn't look, that's not my fault. Her breath turned uneven. I could hear Marcus in the background again, louder now, asking, what did he say? Clara covered the phone and hissed something at him, then came back. We're meeting, she said. You mean Marcus? Today. No, I said. The word came out flat. Tomorrow, she insisted. Liam, don't be stupid. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. You already fixed it when you took the house and left me the land. She went quiet, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then she spoke again, softer, trying a different tactic. 10 years, she said. We were married 10 years. Yes, I said. And you made sure to win. I added, not as an insult, just as a fact. Her voice sharpened again. Where are you, Liam? She asked. Send me your address. I didn't answer. Liam, she said, and now her tone had a crack in it. Please. That word, coming from her, sounded unfamiliar, like she'd never practiced it. I looked up at the building numbers around me, then back down at my phone. Evelyn's warning echoed in my head. Don't speak to your ex-wife about this. She will make herself relevant. I could hang up. I could disappear. But I also knew something else. Clara wouldn't stop. She would escalate. She would show up at my firm. She would corner me in public. She would twist the story until I looked like the villain, because that was the only way she could live with her mistake. So I made a decision I didn't want to make yet. Tomorrow, I said. 10 a.m. Where? She asked instantly. I gave her an address. Not my apartment. Not my old office. An address in the financial district that would make her pause. There was silence on the line, then a small, disbelieving laugh. Why would you be there? She asked. Just be there, I said. 10 a.m. Then I ended the call before she could regain control. I stood still for a moment, phone in my hand, feeling the weight of the next day settle into place. Clara thought she was dragging me into a negotiation. Marcus thought he could intimidate me. Arthur thought he could threaten paperwork in a changing reality. None of them understood what was actually happening. This wasn't a meeting about money. It was a meeting about consequences. And by the time they walked into that room tomorrow, they were going to realize the story they'd been telling themselves, that I was small, that I was slow, that I was easy to erase, had been wrong from the start, and they were going to realize it all at once. By the time I got home that afternoon, the city felt normal in the irritating way it always does when your life is quietly detonating. People still ordered takeout. Buses still hissed at stops. Someone upstairs still played the same 3 guitar chords. And my mailbox still clacked like it always had, except now every envelope felt like it carried a verdict. The Department of Transportation site visit window was coming up, and Evelyn DeWitt's assistant had already emailed me a short list of do's and don'ts. Don't talk numbers. Don't agree to anything informal. Don't let them frame the land as just acreage. And for the love of God, don't let anyone rush you. I follow that. I kept my workdays normal and my evenings clean. I ate, slept when I could, and when I couldn't, I reviewed the timeline again. Preliminary assessment, formal appraisal, opening offer, negotiation, possible hearing, final acquisition. People think it's one call and one check. It's actually a machine with gears, and once the gears start, they don't stop just because somebody gets emotional. That machine was moving now, and Clara had finally heard it. The next day, the Interstate 9 project became the lead story on local news, and I didn't need to watch it to know what they'd show. A polished animation, a red line across a map, a cheerful anchor saying words like economic hub and reduced commute times, a quick mention of eminent domain that most viewers would treat as background noise. For landowners, it's not background noise. It's the sound of your mailbox turning into a courtroom. Clara and Marcus watched that report in the living room of the house she'd taken. And I know this because later, when everything cracked open, Clara's voice gave away the scene in a single sentence. We were just sitting there, and they zoomed in, and Marcus said it would cut 10 minutes off the drive to the club. That's what Marcus saw first, his convenience. Clara saw something else for a split second. A flicker of recognition at a location name, a bend in a road, an interchange label that seemed vaguely familiar, but her brain rejected it because it didn't fit the story she'd been telling herself. In her story, I was small. My inheritance was dirt. Dirt doesn't become millions. People like Clara don't lose the game to a man they've labeled as a loser. So she brushed it off, took a sip of wine, and let Marcus keep talking about traffic. The truth forced its way in anyway, because when the official plat maps dropped the next morning, Arthur Vance did what he should have done months earlier. He looked. He matched the interchange footprint to parcel records. He saw the parcel ID. He saw my name. And for the first time since my divorce, Arthur's voice lost its polish. Clara was at a spa when he called, and that detail matters because it explains the shock. She was lying there expecting silence and soft music and confirmation of her own success, and instead she got a lawyer with panic in his throat. He told her the interchange wasn't merely near the land she let me keep. The interchange was the land she let me keep. He told her the state's baseline valuation for corridor land was already high, and for an interchange parcel it could go higher because interchange land isn't about farming, it's about what gets built around the exit. Services, fuel, food, lodging, the whole ecosystem that grows where cars have to slow down. Clara heard the word millions and immediately tried to turn it into something else. Fraud, trickery, betrayal. Because it was easier than admitting she'd signed away a winning ticket simply because it didn't come in a velvet box. She ended the call and dialed me with shaking fingers. And when I answered and she said, "The land," I let her say it all out loud because sometimes people need to hear their own stupidity echo back before they believe it. "You knew," she said, not as a question, as an accusation meant to turn me into the villain so she could stay the hero. "Yes," I said. She made it sound like she'd been slapped. "How could you do that to me?" There was again that assumption that my knowledge, my preparation, my inheritance, my future belonged to her by default because we had once shared a kitchen. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I accepted what you offered." She jumped immediately to the legal fantasy. "This is fraud. You hid an asset." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "The corridor review has been public," I said. "It's public record. If Arthur didn't look, that's not my problem." That sentence did more damage than any insult could have because it removed the drama. It made it administrative. It placed the responsibility exactly where it belonged, with the people who assumed a quiet man had nothing worth checking. She demanded a meeting. She tried anger, then pleading, then that low, dangerous tone she used when she wanted to scare someone into compliance. I told her tomorrow at 10, and I gave her an address in the financial district that I knew would get under Marcus's skin. She asked why I would be there, and I said, just be there, because I wasn't offering explanations anymore. After I hung up, my phone kept lighting up with messages that shifted in tone like a person changing masks in front of a mirror. "We can work this out. Don't be petty. Think of our history. You're being cruel. Liam, please. This isn't over." I didn't respond. I forwarded the text to Evelyn's office because Evelyn had asked for anything that showed harassment or attempted interference. She replied with one line, "Good. Let her talk. You stay silent." The next morning, I arrived early to the building and rode the elevator up with two men in suits talking about a merger. They didn't look at me, and I liked that. I wasn't interested in being seen. I was interested in being placed correctly. Evelyn had offered to attend the meeting, but I asked her not to sit in immediately. I wanted one clean conversation first, not because I thought I could reason with Clara, but because I wanted clarity. I wanted them to hear it from me before lawyers turn it into theater. The receptionist area for Hayes, DeWitt and Partners was still new enough that the nameplate looked almost too bright. That wasn't an accident. Evelyn understood symbols the way I understood space. If Clara needed to feel the shift in power, she would feel it the moment she stepped out of the elevator and saw the name she didn't expect. At 10 sharp, the elevator doors opened and Clara walked out first, dressed as if she were still going to a brunch where people took photos of their plates. Marcus followed, jaw tight, eyes scanning like he was trying to find something to dominate. And behind them, Eleanor. That surprised me more than it should have. Clara's mother looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in posture, like she'd been carrying the weight of her daughter's choices, and it had finally bent her. Clara's eyes caught the name on the wall. Hayes, DeWitt and Partners. For a moment she froze, and I saw her brain scramble to update its story. Marcus saw it too, and his face flickered with something I hadn't expected: recognition. He knew Evelyn DeWitt's name. Every developer in the state knew Evelyn DeWitt's name. Marcus had probably cursed it during a late-night deal when a small landowner got more than expected. He hid his reaction quickly, but not quickly enough. The associate led them into the conference room. I was already seated, not behind a grand table like the divorce meeting, just at the head of a simple one, because intimidation was never my style. Control was. Clara didn't sit right away. She looked around like she was hoping to catch me in a lie. "What is this place?" she asked. "It's my office," I said. "Don't play games," she snapped. "How do you have an office here?" Marcus cut in with forced calm. "Hayes, DeWitt." "DeWitt, as in Evelyn DeWitt?" I held his gaze. "Yes." Clara's mouth tightened. "We're not here to talk about your upgrade," she said, gesturing like she couldn't decide whether to mock it or fear it. "We're here because you defrauded me." I didn't argue the word. I let it hang, and then I reached down and put the leather portfolio on the table. Clara's eyes locked onto it like it was an enemy. That alone told me I'd been right. She remembered it from the divorce table, remembered how I'd held it calmly while she tried to crush me, and she'd assumed it was just papers, just a man clinging to something useless. "Let's talk about what happened," I said. "We know what happened," she shot back. "You knew the land was worth millions, and you let me sign that settlement. I'm entitled to half of that money." "No," I said. One syllable. Not angry. Final. Marcus leaned forward, voice smooth the way people sound when they're trying not to look desperate. "Liam," he said, "let's be practical. You don't need all of it. Clara and you, there's history. We can renegotiate something fair." I looked at him and realized this was the first time he'd ever said the word fair in my presence. I opened the portfolio and slid the first document across the table. It wasn't a highway map. It was a receipt. Clara glanced at it, confused, then her face flushed when she recognized the jeweler's logo. "You're entitled to this," I said. "The Patek Philippe, purchased 6 months before you left. Paid from our joint savings." Clara's mouth opened, closed. Marcus stared at the receipt and then at Clara. "You told me it was a gift," he said, voice low. "It was," Clara snapped too fast. I didn't let them spiral yet. I slid the second document across. A printout of a social post, one of Clara's friends quoting her joke about my useless dirt at her party, the comments full of laughing emojis and smug little lines about me living in a shoebox. Clara's hand twitched as if she wanted to snatch the paper and erase the evidence. "You're entitled to that too," I said. The public mockery. The victory lap. I turned my gaze to Eleanor and slid nothing to her, because her evidence wasn't on paper. "And you," I said quietly, "you're entitled to the silence you gave me on moving day." Eleanor flinched. Clara glared at her mother, as if daring her to speak. Eleanor didn't speak yet. I took out the settlement and placed it last like a cornerstone. "And this," I said, tapping the signed agreement, "you're all entitled to this. The document you drafted. The one your lawyer celebrated. The one you signed without reading anything you didn't value." Clara's voice sharpened again, searching for footing. "This doesn't change the fact you hid the value." "I didn't hide anything," I said. "You didn't look." She slammed her palm on the table. "Because who would look? It was empty land. It was nothing." "It was never nothing," I said, and my voice stayed steady because I wasn't trying to win a shouting match. "It was just something you couldn't show off." Clara's eyes narrowed. "So you admit it," she hissed. "You wanted to punish me." That accusation was the last lifeline she had, because if she could make me the villain, she could remain the victim. I shook my head. "This isn't punishment," I said. "This is consequence." Marcus pushed back his chair, frustration leaking through his veneer. "Liam, don't do this moral lecture thing," he snapped. "We can litigate. We can tie this up for years. Is that what you want?" "If you think you have a case," I said, "file it." Marcus's nostrils flared. He looked at Clara like she'd just cost him something he couldn't afford to lose because she had. That's when I saw what I hadn't seen clearly before. Marcus wasn't as secure as he pretended. He was leveraged. He needed cash flow. He needed a big injection of solid money to stabilize a tower of loans and promises. He'd seen Clara taking the house as a win because it was a tangible asset. But the land money, interchange money, would have been bedrock. And now it was in my hands, not his. He turned to Clara, voice rising. "You said you handled this," he said. "You said your lawyer was a shark." "He is," Clara snapped. "How was I supposed to know?" Marcus laughed without humor. "By doing your job," he spat. "By reading. By checking. You threw away a winning ticket because it didn't sparkle." Clara whipped back to me, eyes wet now, voice cracking as she tried a new angle. "Liam, please," she said. The room changed with that word. The queen became a beggar. 10 years, she whispered. "We built a life. You can't just take everything." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I felt a dull sadness, like seeing a building collapse after you warned everyone the supports were bad. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm just not giving you what you already threw away." She reached for the settlement, as if touching it could rewrite it. "You loved me," she said, desperate. "I did." I answered, and I meant it. But the woman I loved wouldn't have brought another man to our table wearing the watch I told her I was saving for. She wouldn't have called my work a sandbox, and she wouldn't have tried to leave me with nothing but a sneer. My words weren't meant to cut. They were meant to name reality. Clara's face tightened, and for a moment I saw anger try to rebuild her armor. Then Eleanor spoke, and the sound of her voice in that room was like someone finally turning on a light. "He's right," Eleanor said, quietly at first, then clearer. "He's right, Clara." Clara spun toward her mother. "Don't," she warned. Eleanor's hands trembled, but she didn't stop. "I watched you change," Eleanor said. "I watched you push him away and treat his kindness like weakness." I said nothing. "That is my shame." Eleanor's eyes filled. She turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't deserve any of this." Clara stared like she couldn't believe her mother had crossed the line. That was the last support beam snapping. Marcus looked away, disgusted, not at me, not even at Clara's cruelty, but at his own lost money. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. "This is over," he muttered, and it wasn't directed at me. It was directed at Clara. He had already begun calculating his exit. Clara reached for him with her eyes. He didn't look back. She turned to me again, voice raw. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just going to ruin me?" "I'm not ruining you," I said. "You're meeting yourself." I stood, signaling the end. "There's nothing else to say," I added. "If your lawyer contacts me again, he'll talk to Evelyn DeWitt." Marcus's head snapped up at that name. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Eleanor lowered her gaze, tears slipping silently. They left in a staggered sequence. Marcus first, fast, already moving on. Clara last, slower, like she was walking through a door that wouldn't open again no matter how hard she pushed. Eleanor in the middle, pausing just long enough to whisper another, "I'm sorry," as she passed me, as if saying it twice might undo 10 years of watching. After they were gone, I sat back down for a moment, not because I was shaken, but because I wanted to remember the feeling of not chasing them. That was my real victory. Not the money, not the office, not the nameplate, but the fact that I could finally stop trying to be understood by someone who measured love in status symbols. The DOT negotiations moved like Evelyn predicted. The state opened with an offer designed to sound generous if you didn't know what you were hearing. Evelyn rejected it in a single paragraph, then followed with a counter that treated the interchange parcel as what it was, a strategic asset with a future revenue ecosystem. There were meetings, site visits, appraisers, dry emails, and moments where the state tried to speed things up by saying things like, "We need a response by Friday," as if my life depended on their timeline. Evelyn never let them rush. She asked for projections, asked for comparable acquisitions, asked for traffic flow estimates and commercial zoning forecasts. And because she knew the law, she also knew where the state's confidence ended and their fear began. In court, under scrutiny. When the final number came, through, $6 million after negotiations and fees, my first feeling wasn't joy. It was relief. Not because I wanted to buy things, but because I wanted to stop being at the mercy of other people's choices. The check didn't make me a new person. It just removed the weight that had kept me small in other people's eyes. That weight had never been my reality. It had been Clara's projection. Across town, the house began to rot in a different way. Not physically, not at first. Financially, Clara had grabbed it like a trophy, but a trophy comes with a stand. The house came with a mortgage size for 2 incomes and an assumed cash injection that never arrived. Marcus's business wasn't the solid fortress he advertised. It was a performance supported by debt and deadlines. Without the land money, his performance cracked. The party stopped first. The friends drifted next, because those friends were never friends. They were an audience. Clara tried to sell the house, but high-end markets don't move just because you panic. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming, and creditors don't care about your social status. Marcus stayed just long enough to see if Clara could produce a solution: money, leverage, and new angle. When she couldn't, he left the way he had entered, casually, without apology, treating a person like a transaction that no longer benefited him. Clara came home one day to empty closets and a note that didn't explain anything, because men like Marcus don't explain, they move on. The watch was gone too, of course. That detail reached me later through the same small city network that had fed me rumors earlier. I didn't feel satisfied hearing it. I felt tired, because the pattern was obvious now, and it should have been obvious to Clara years ago. If someone values you for what you can provide, they will vanish when you provide nothing. Clara's fall wasn't cinematic. It was slow and humiliating in the most ordinary way. She had to get a job. Not a glamorous one. Not a consulting title. A real schedule, real hours, real managers, real consequences for showing up late. She ended up working as a hostess at a restaurant she used to visit with Marcus, the kind of place where she once corrected servers on wine pronunciation. Now she smiled at strangers and asked if they had a reservation. Some nights, she recognized people she used to call friends. They pretended not to recognize her. That kind of social death is brutal because it's quiet and public at the same time. Eleanor checked on her, but their relationship had changed too. When a parent finally refuses to enable you, it feels like betrayal, even though it's actually the first honest thing they've done. Eleanor and I spoke a few times during those months, not often, not dramatically, just brief calls, updates, small human moments. She told me Clara was surviving, not thriving. She told me Clara still talked about me sometimes, but without the old contempt, more like someone chewing on a regret they can't swallow. I told Eleanor I didn't hate Clara. I didn't. Hate is still attachment, and I was done being attached. While Clara was trying to hold up a collapsing life, I was building something simple with the money, a path. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't throw a party to announce that I'd won. Instead, I did what I'd always done when I finally had space. I built. The Meridian Project had been a sketch in my notebooks for years, an idea I kept returning to when clients asked me to make something luxurious and soulless. Meridian was affordable housing designed like dignity mattered. Green spaces, natural light, materials that lasted, community areas that didn't feel like an afterthought. Clara used to call that kind of work small. She didn't understand scale. Scale isn't height. Scale is impact. With Evelyn as a partner handling the legal and financial structure, and me handling design and planning, we made Meridian real. She was older than I remember Clara being, not in years, but in posture, like life had been heavy, and she'd finally stopped pretending she could carry it with a smile. She wore a plain coat and held a small bag. She looked up, and our eyes met through the glass. There was no anger in her face, no manipulation, just recognition, an acknowledgement that she had chosen one path and I had built another. She gave a small nod, barely there, the kind of nod people give when they accept something without asking for more. Then the bus arrived, she stepped on, and she disappeared into the moving city like anyone else. I watched for a moment, then went back to the plans. That was the end of the story in the only way it could be. Not with applause, not with vengeance, but with a quiet closing of a door. People who hear what happened often focus on the 6 million as if that's the punchline. It isn't. The money was just the consequence of a fact Clara didn't respect. True value is often quiet, and if you don't have the patience to look past the shiny surface, You will misjudge the ground you're standing on. Clara believed worth was loud, expensive, and immediate. Marcus believed the same thing, just with more swagger. They chased display. They collected symbols. They treated people like accessories. And for a while, that worked, because a lot of the world rewards noise. But noise doesn't hold up a life when the bills come, when the friends disappear, when the person you chose for status leave the moment you become inconvenient. What held up my life wasn't a house. It wasn't a watch. It wasn't even the land itself. It was preparation, patience, and a refusal to trade my dignity for someone else's approval. The most satisfying part of all of this wasn't seeing Claire struggle. It was realizing I didn't need to see her struggle to feel whole again. I only needed to stop handing her the power to define what mattered. That's what I kept when a marriage ended. And that's what I built on when everyone else thought I'd been left with nothing but dirt.